Hello, I'm Betsy Stone. Welcome to Pictures at an Exhibition. We are at Amherst Town Hall, that beautiful red brick building near the town green, and I'm going to be interviewing Bernie Kubiak. But first I want to tell you a little bit about the gallery space here. It's been operating for more than a decade, and it shows all kinds of artwork, prints, photographs, drawings, paintings, and an unusual thing is that artist's work gets to be up for 2 months. So I hope you come in and see the exhibit. I'd like to introduce you to Bernie.
Good
Bernie.
afternoon. Hi.
Yeah. Bernie's a photographer. Been in the Valley for how many years?
Since 1970, so a long time.
And how long have you been doing photography here?
I've been making photographs since I was a teenager, and so that's more years than I want to admit to.
Okay. Well, we're standing in a little gallery on the first floor, and the pictures that I'm seeing, the photographs, are very atmospheric, I have to say, right off the bat. I feel like I'm in a foggy landscape and trees that are sort of snaggled and craggled. Am I leaving anything out here?
No, you're correct. You're right on target, and this is pretty deliberate. I had one visitor come through and told me that she was a landscape painter and she really didn't like photographs, but she liked these photographs because they were moody, and there is a deliberate effort, both in terms of when I made them and how in some post-processing they get that kind of misty, ethereal, otherworldly effect. I really want people to look at the photographs and tell a story. It may not be the story that I had in mind, it's the story that they have in mind, and that's what's important about it, is to get people to look and to let their minds wander a little bit. Speaking
of stories, Bernie, there's a photo over here that I'd like to talk about.
Okay, let's take a look.
I'm reminded of pastel paintings when I look at this photo in particular. It's got that soft quality about it. But it also, for me, this is a story. This is, a lonely little tree, and here's some big tree. Is that menacing? Is it, a good tree?
Well, this was, I was actually on my way to a meeting very early one morning in the town of Plainfield, and I saw this and I said, well, I'm going to be late to the meeting. This is really, this sort of has a number of themes in it that I like to play with, and again, it's soft, it's misty, it's foggy. It's sort of magical and or mysterious. But what you have here is you've got an old orchard here. These trees have been standing here for some time. This orchard's in a little bit of disrepair, although it's been mowed. And you've got gestures going on here. You've got a gesture flowing this way and a gesture flowing this way. So when I saw this, it looked to me like these two trees were reaching out to each other. They're not as close as they seem because the lens flattens them, but that's one thing, would be that gesture, the sense of motion and movement in there. The other thing is this tree, I think it's a great illustration of something I was turned on to probably 25 or more years ago, and that's fractal geometry in chaos. This is really replicating itself in ways that you could appreciate if you were doing that kind of mathematics. And it reminds me of patterns I've seen replicated elsewhere. If you look at a topographic map, or you're in an airplane and you look at a river system, you're going to see these patterns. If you go to the ocean and look at lines in the sand, you're going to find these patterns. If you look at someone making sketches of what neurons in the brain looks like, you're going to find these patterns. So this is nature replicating itself, and that's one thing that runs through all of the images, is that chaos that's there, that geometry.
So geometry and chaos, they seem opposite to me, but at first glance there's a tangle of branches, but as you look closer, there's the larger pattern of the large branch and then the smaller branches that replicate that the larger pattern. Is that what you're talking
and
about?
this repeats itself. One of the photographers who has had a real impact on me is a man by the name of Freeman Patterson. Freeman's a Canadian. He's a minister turned photographer. And Freeman talks about his photography as being applied geometry, but when you see Freeman's images, they don't look like they're obviously geometric, but you look for those, and that's one of the things I think a number of photographers do, is we look for those patterns that repeat themselves and replicate themselves. And if you can accept the notion that these pieces of the tree repeats itself, then you're seeing geometry in there that's replicated, that's fractal geometry, that's part of chaos theory.
Bernie, there's another photograph that I'd like to talk about in this section, and it's called November 4th.
Yeah. This is another, obviously this is a favorite of mine. This is Mount Pollock, which I'm just down the street from where I live. And some of these trees aren't there anymore because this is, some of these trees have been removed given their age and their infirmities, if you will. But again, this struck me as this is a place of great promise. This is an orchard that was a productive orchard. Apples were and fruit were very important food sources for one, and also sources of cider for two. And this has been abandoned. The town bought it and uses it as a conservation space. And I was just struck by the geometry of these trees for one, and then the sky's rolling in. That sky was there. I've enhanced it and heightened it a little bit, but to me, again, it's one of those images that suggests a mood and suggests a strange place or an odd place that you may want to walk through or think about.
By the way, this is a working town hall, so if you hear some strange sounds in the background or see people walking by, we're in an office where people are working here and other people are coming in. But I'd like to walk down the first floor hall and look at another photo of Bernie's, if you'll follow us. Bernie, this is the photo that I was interested in talking about more. For one thing, it's a little different. It's got some color going on in it. And it also is those trees again, but there's an interesting man-made structure here.
Right. This is actually behind the Congregational Church in South Amherst, and it's they have a crucifix. And this reminded me of a poem that I read way back in my youth by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and a line that goes, "Christ climbed down from his bare tree." So I titled it as Ferlinghetti's Trees and included that man-made bare tree and with these. And it does have some color in it. It's been, as all of my images are, it's been changed a bit. And there are textures in here that I've added in. The idea is basically to have that memory of Ferlinghetti's poem triggered by this place that I like to go to and walk through. It's a very quiet, calm place.
So you mentioned memory. It seems as if memory is part of your visual world. Is that true? How does it impact your photography?
It's funny because memory is a very fragile thing, and it's a fleeting thing. But it's when I do photography, I can the looking at the image will bring me back into a number of memories about where I was, what I was doing, what was going through my head when I made the photograph, and that seems to it's not just me. Other folks I've talked to who make photographs will say the same thing. The other thing is that memories will suggest themselves as you're walking through. I don't I don't approach a place with the idea that I have a photograph in mind. I approach a place with the idea that I'm going to explore it and see what it suggests to me. And so things that I've done in the past, and I grew up in a small town. I spent a lot of time in the woods, and I've had a fairly classical, liberal arts education. So there's lots of stuff that's rattling through my head when I walk into an area like this and look at what I might do for to create an image.
Let's go look at some other photographs.
Okay.
We're on the second floor of Amherst Town Hall now, and continuing our discussion with Bernie Kubiak. There's a wonderful photograph here that I would really like to talk with Bernie about. Bernie, this one, November 23rd. I noticed a couple of things about it. One is, I think most of your, or maybe all of your photographs have a main character, as if there is a story about them, and there's one main character that I can always pick out. And another is that this main character seems to have a halo around its head.
Well, this is, this is Mount Pollock, and the images on this floor, second floor, they're made at Mount Pollock or behind the Congregational Church in South Amherst, and yeah, there is, this is sort of this tree is sort of the star of the show, and the photograph's been manipulated, it's been toned, it has texture screens put in it, and yeah, he does. The tree does have a halo around it, and that was deliberate to try to, in part because it was so strongly backlit, so you're going to get some glow from that. But I've also tried to emphasize the grandeur of this old device.
This brings up the subject of processing your work, making pictures versus taking pictures. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you arrive at the final result?
Well, let me just say that just about every digital photograph is processed. It may be something that you do. It may be something that the manufacturer does in terms of the imaging on the phone. The same holds true with digital cameras or larger digital cameras. I look at the image and I try to. I bring the images home. I put them on the computer, and they sit there for a while. What I then try to do is I go back to them and see what it might suggest to me as a way of, how was I feeling that morning? How am I feeling now about it? Because those emotions change over time. And what do I want to emphasize? And what would work in terms of enhancing the image without being overwhelming it. And so I'll look at, I have a set of textures that I like, that I use repeatedly. I have certain color settings that I use repeatedly, and at least for this series. So these tend to have a little bit of a coffee tone to them. And that's part of the process, for me, it's part of the process of making the photograph. This did not come straight out of the camera.
Well, thank you, Bernie, for having this show and taking the time to talk with us.
I very much appreciate the opportunity. It's great, and thanks to you and to the folks who support the arts here in town.
Bernie Kubiak's exhibit will be up till the end of December here at the Amherst Town Hall. And our next segment will be about Richard Cohen's landscape pastels at the Jewish community of Amherst, interviewed by Ava Fierst. Thank you for listening and watching.